Welcome to the Rising Entrepreneurs Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and their journey. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I am the host of this show, and every week we feature smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from all kinds of companies and organizations. And if you check out the archives, we've got lots of great episodes in there. And of course, this episode is brought to you by EO San Francisco, which is the Bay Area chapter of the Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a global peer-to-peer network of more than 20,000 influential business owners across 200 chapters, 60 plus countries. And if you are the founder, co-founder, owner, or controlling shareholder of a company that generates over $1 million a year in revenues, and you want to connect with other like-minded, successful entrepreneurs, EO is for you. And the EOSF chapter was founded in 1991. Today has over about 120 members in industries ranging from marketing to agriculture, tech, and professional services. And you can learn more by going to eosf.org. And my name is John Corcoran. I'm the co-founder of Rise25 and member of the board of EO San Francisco. And my privilege and pleasure today to interview Genevieve Barter. She is the president of Palmeira Home and Health. She's been a leader in the home healthcare industry since about 2009 and also expanded the company to the San Francisco Bay Area and overseen operations across California, Nevada, and Arizona. So we're going to talk about all of that. Genevieve, such a pleasure to have you here today. And let's dive into your background, your story. You come from a line of entrepreneurs, and your parents, father's from Ireland, mother's from the Philippines. Where did they meet?
Yeah, interesting story, right? They met in New York City, as I think a very American story. My father was in his residency for ophthalmology. He came from Cork, Ireland. And my mother went to St. John's University for her business and her MBA and her law degree. So I think they were set up on a blind date and they ended up meeting and I guess having a little bit of romance in New York, and then ended up moving over to California and then finally settling in Southern California.
Yeah, naturally they thought, let's get out of this New York and move to the high desert of Southern California, which is where you grew up.
It's a very odd place to end up.
Yeah.
As two people from across seas, but it worked.
Yeah, it's not like Ireland and not like the Philippines.
A little different. But
yeah.
I think because of what the profession my father was in, once you kind of sit down shop as a physician and you start to get patients, it's hard to move and start all over again. And he had a pretty big business in the high desert because the population just exploded from the minute he kind of stepped foot in that whole Apple Valley, Victorville, Barstow. I think people from Southern California might know these small towns because it's on the way to Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
From Southern California, I feel like you would. I'm speaking a different language right now.
Yeah, well, it definitely is different from a lot of the coastal cities in California.
Very different. Very different.
The last time I stayed in Barstow, we were kept up in the hotel room from the sound of trains going by. I think there's a lot of trains that go through.
Right.
Or maybe
Yes.
Might be thinking of a different city, but anyways, so your parents were immigrants to the country, both of them, and so they put a premium, like many immigrant parents do, on education for you when you were young.
Sure, I think that's the immigrant story, of course, in America. I mean, across the seas, just how to better yourself is to make sure that take advantage of the American educational system. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't. Sometimes I'm like, where did this entrepreneurial journey start? Because I was just always in school and thought of myself as more of like a scholastic person. And it just was summer breaks, never had the lemonade stand, never had side gigs, which is always in school.
Yeah. And did you feel like, so your father basically ran his own business as an ophthalmologist. Do you feel like you were aware of that? Because sometimes, someone a highly educated medical professional, it's like the business is secondary. It's the primary thing is the service.
Yeah, I that's so true. And even speaking to you, I can see where I'm not making sense in my own statements, because you're right. He was an ophthalmologist. He had 3 offices at one point. My mom ran his business. All the kids were required to work there over Easter break or, Christmas break. So here I am saying, I don't know where my entrepreneurial spirit comes from, but here we go, have parents that are entrepreneurs. So
now sometimes
I made myself a liar.
Sometimes people react to that by running away from entrepreneurship, saying, I hate this. I don't want this highs and lows. But do you recall having a feeling towards it when you were younger?
It's really interesting. I think because my mom was a lawyer, I thought of myself as a lawyer. We kind of two options. You were either going to be a doctor or you're going to be a lawyer. And I promised I would never be a doctor, and I was going to go into law school. And so I guess the entrepreneurialism wasn't really the initial calling, in that way. It was always just more of a what profession where you're going to go, what kind of professional where you're going to be.
Yeah.
That was what was really important. I said I would never get into healthcare, did not like that side of it. And years later,
Look where you are now. Right.
yeah.
So, and you also had entrepreneurship on your mother's side. So your mother's grandfather only had the equivalent of an eighth grade education in the Philippines. He had kind of a farming background and then ended up buying up different businesses and kind of building an empire. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's again, where does that entrepreneurial streak come from? Yeah, it's this really fascinating story. My grandparents were farmers in a small town in Luzon, in the middle of the island where people would know the capital, Manila, is. And yeah, bought and sold multiple businesses, sometimes, just kind of working their way up and eventually ended up in the hotel business, condo complexes, apartment units. And did kind of pull, I don't know, that old saying of kind of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and did really, really well in the time they were on this earth. They've both passed now. And it's just it's truly an incredible story. I mean, I'm here because of that, right? They sent my mom to New York to get an education because that was, they knew they didn't have it and really invested in their own children in that particular regard. And then
Yeah.
you think, I don't know, you think about these crazy opportunities that you've been given because these people made really insane sacrifices in a totally different place on earth. And it's a fascinating story when you go into the details of it, but we could be talking about that for hours just on itself. But yes, my grandmother really was probably the driving factor there. I think my grandfather went along for the ride in most cases. She was the one pushing to buy a hotel.
Okay.
Apparently she bought it in secret, didn't tell him, and then just was like one day like, "Hey, by the way, we have this hotel now.
She
We
bought
are."
hotels in secret.
I guess so.
Crazy. Wow.
Yeah, crazy story. Um,
And these exist to this day. This is a family run business in the Philippines to this day.
yeah, so my uncles have run it, my mother has run it, and now, as of 2 years ago, my sister actually moved from Orange County, California, to Baguio, in the Philippines, and she is now the new CEO for the last 2 years.
And you were involved in convincing her to go over there. Tell us
Not
about
sure.
that. Tell us about
Yeah,
how you convinced her to go over there.
not sure she would appreciate me taking. I don't know if she loves or hates
Yeah,
me.
I wouldn't say sole credit. I just said involved in convincing.
She's gonna
You
listen to
are very persuasive.
she's gonna listen to this podcast and be like, "Oh yeah, I forgot to sink into this situation." Um, it was a big sacrifice for her, and she, was in the wellness space. She owned a gym, and COVID didn't really do too well for her, and so I think she was looking. And she also has a very entrepreneurial streak in her. If anybody of all of my siblings, my cousins, really most people I've met on Earth, I think my sister was an insane operator. She does have a background in operations. I'm just so awed by her ability to just get things done and get things moving and set down process. And we all know to build a really good business, you need somebody who's really good at putting down process and SOPs and procedures. And
Hmm.
so I thought, gosh, this is, small businesses, this is the kind of person this business needs. And so hey, there's this thing in the Philippines, and I feel like you'd be perfect for it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, it took some convincing. Even when she was there, she was like, well, just 1 year. Now she's been there for two, and I think they're having incredible, what do you call it? Incredible success at the hotel under her guidance. Record months, and has been now for quite a few months. So she's just amazing, and she is really a big inspiration for me. We get on the phone probably once a week and just talk about our mutual kind of what do you do in these situations.
Mm. Do you find
Now,
that there are similarities that you come across in your business versus hers?
I think all businesses have a very similar base. It's
Hmm.
just the business of people. I'm in the service business. She's in the service business. And so it doesn't matter that we're in two separate countries, dealing a lot in two different languages potentially. People are people the
Hmm.
world over. And they want a good job, they want a good employer, they want to being good employees, they want to get paid fair wages, they want to excel in their work. And they want leadership and they want someone to tell them how to win every day. I think that we have a lot of those conversations. How do we set people up to win? And therefore, as owners, as business, as leaders, we win.
Yeah.
It's a struggle, right? I don't know. We'll ever figure it out. It's the part
Yeah.
of win that's hard.
So you go off to college and you get to college and in spite of having spent a lot of time in academia and school, you felt that you didn't excel in college. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think I was just very distracted. I was very impatient. I feel like I went to school at 17, the University of San Diego. I just flailed. I just didn't have any direction. Didn't, I had this whole thing of since I was 4 years old of being a lawyer. And when I got there, I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this for the rest of my life. I had been, it's kind of like almost like someone who's been overly educated. I wanted a break from
Yeah.
being in school. Um, and it just didn't seem to suit me. And so I just didn't do very well. I was probably the poster child for maybe should have done a gap year, maybe should have just taken some time off to figure things out. Was probably a little bit too young and didn't relish in the experience.
Mm, mm. So you ended up discovering network marketing.
Hmm.
Tell us
Yeah.
about that experience, which kind of opened you into the entrepreneurial journey.
Yes, it's a kind of a love-hate relationship. I think to be perfectly honest, I think it did open me up to business, really kind of what that journey could look like, making something for yourself, running an organization, leadership, finance, uh, service industry. I'm not sure that was in the end, looking back, where I should have been. And I was 17, but it definitely opened up the eyes of like, oh, there's a whole other world out here of people that aren't in school all the time. And I wish I'd paid more attention in school, I think is the
Yeah.
what I wish I would have relished. But it definitely opened me up to a different side of life and probably more leadership. I think one of the things that network marketing does really well is speak to, in order to be successful in business, and is the crux of it is you yourself being a great leader. And
Yeah.
the head of the organization being always and constantly evolving themselves and being a better human being, and therefore attracting really good human beings to thyself. And I think as someone as like my father, who was a practitioner, um, I think that really interested me, and what made him really good at his job was he was just a really good person, and he tried to
Mm.
be a good physician, and he tried to tell the truth to his patients. And he tried when he didn't know the answer. Remember, he would be like, "I have to send them down to Loma Linda or send them to UCLA because I just don't know." And I appreciated that truthfulness, And I think he was a leader, and he didn't even know it, and never explored that avenue about himself. So that was very intriguing, is the work on thyself and, to become a better person. And as someone kind of flailing around in college and not really getting a grasp, I think that spoke to me. This education of self really spoke to me.
And through the network marketing, you got opportunities to do public speaking. And I believe I recall you were going around the country speaking at different places. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah. Life is your stage. Maybe in a different life, John, I was supposed to be an actress. I was really good at the
Uh-huh.
I don't know. Yeah, I think that is one of the parts that is about, facing your biggest fear, getting up in front of people and really being able to weave a story where people pay attention is really fascinating. And maybe that was the part that I was supposed to be a lawyer. Maybe that's a skill that I wanted
Mm.
to take there. When you're
Hmm.
17, and you find these things that intrigue you about maybe these passions that you find, you kind of go in and out of it. But yeah, that also was a big part of that journey. Was facing a big fear, getting up in front of people, all the things that I think that entrepreneurs should work on,
Yeah,
or I still work on, which is taking the things that make you the most nervous. Supposedly, that's like one of the top fears in the world, not getting eaten
it
by sharks,
is.
but
Yeah.
speaking publicly in
No,
front of
not
people.
getting eaten by a shark. That's preferable to standing in front of a group of 50 people. Yeah.
I can agree with that. It's very scary.
So what drew you away from the industry? Because you aren't in it today.
No, I'm not sure that it was just the right industry for me. I think I've seen a lot of people have success in that industry, but I did well under a brick and mortar. I ended up going back to school actually at 26 to try to get a little bit more education now that I was a little bit more focused. Um, I think network marketing also draws you away from kind of the university setting, which I think had I been a little bit older and just kind of knew what I wanted. I appreciate the structure. I
Hmm.
appreciate the time you're given to kind of grow up in the university setting. So it wasn't right for me. And I think I wanted something different. And, I think I did all the right things in your 20s, which is basically wander around like a lost puppy trying to figure out what I was going to do
Yeah.
with the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Thank goodness I got the opportunity to do that in my 20s. I was
Yeah.
privileged to, have parents that kind of supported me on, well, whatever you want to do next, I guess you'll land on something someday.
And your mother ended up buying the home health business, which you eventually get involved in, and you ended up buying from her. So, how did you end up getting drawn into that?
Yeah, I think the theme of my story is family business, right? Just
It sounds like it. Yeah.
he does. We're just gonna get behind
Yeah.
for bad. Yeah. So in my parents' retirement, my father, like I said, was a ophthalmologist. My mom ran his businesses. And I think one of their thought processes was the home health care. How could they invest in a business that was looking to take off over the next few decades and plan for their retirement? So they invested in a small home health care company in Las Vegas, which was about 2 or 3 hours from where we grew up in the high desert. Um, and the partnership didn't really work out. So my mom ended up kind of owning a home healthcare company. She thought she was an investor, and all of a sudden she was the
She's running
rep.
it. Yeah.
So she's spending a lot of time in Las Vegas, and I think at a time in her life where she probably didn't really want to have a startup company.
Yeah.
Um, as she was trying to prepare for her retirement. So it was just one of those, hey, what are you doing? Maybe you're going to go to law school, maybe not. Let me come to Vegas and help you out and see what I can do. I had this kind of sales, network marketing background, and I thought, well, I can help you out with some of the home health sales or the marketing structures, and ended up, what you fight against the most sometimes is what you end right back falling in
Mm.
love with the healthcare industry in a different way, I think, than what my father had done, but in very similar. And so ended up here's kind of I think where the last 20 years of my life kind of probably starts. The entrepreneurial journey really, really revs up. Worked in the office for a couple of years, worked on the sales teams, worked on the marketing structures, then ended up working as an administrator inside the office, and then ended up buying the company from my parents a couple of years later. And then, we had it in Vegas, we expanded into Arizona, and then more recently, like you stated at the beginning of this, more recently, the Bay Area.
And so you expand to Arizona and the Bay Area. How are those expansions? How did that go?
You know, I was again luck, I suppose. My aunt, who has a home health care company in Palm Springs, super successful in the industry. She too had tried to expand into Phoenix, and she herself, I remember she called me up and she said the same thing. I don't know why I'm expanding into Phoenix when I myself am trying to retire. This seems
Mm.
silly. Why don't you just buy it from me? Vegas is
Mm.
close to Phoenix, and I did.
Mm.
So we had, the expansion into the Arizona, the Phoenix marketplace probably about 10 years ago.
Hmm.
And we were always looking for kind of to expand more. The home healthcare, Vegas is the smaller town. Phoenix 10 years ago was much smaller than it is now. And I think the economies of scale played well into having multiple home healthcare agencies. So we looked in Southern California. We're looking really for that West Coast expansion. And about 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago now, we ended up buying a third company in the San Francisco marketplace.
Mm. Was it hard to tie those together? Las Vegas, Phoenix, San Francisco. I mean, for someone on maybe on the East Coast, they'd think, oh, well, those not that far apart, but in many ways they are kind of far apart. And from managing a business standpoint, it could be difficult to manage. So was it hard to tie them together?
Yes. I think there's a really big debate about small business, right? Is if I had a mentor once that said, wherever you expand to, if you are the owner and operator, though, let's go with the operator, prepare to be in those marketplaces at some point in the month. So if you want to jump on a plane and be in Texas or Philadelphia or Louisiana, go ahead and open up businesses there, but you will be expected to be in those places. Now, I know I can read a book and it will say maybe hire an operator or do something else, but we just didn't have a lot of budgets for that. So I would end up, yeah, you're right. I was a road warrior. I couldn't I remember leasing cars. My accountants told me to lease cars and I would return the car and I would have 12,000, I would, buy 12,000 miles on it. And I would have put on over 40,000 in years.
It's a lot of old rollover costs.
I remember because I couldn't afford the plane tickets back and forth between Phoenix and Vegas. So we would just drive and I'd put the dogs in the back. My husband, who ended up becoming my business partner, he would drive, I would drive, and we just would drive all the way. And it can be exhausting, lives of hotels and really just like being on the road. I think it served us well because we knew our marketplaces really, really well. But surely it was exhausting. It's like people always say like, oh, you were so young when you bought this business. First of all, I think it aged me really quickly, but hopefully, thank goodness, I was in my early 30s when I was doing this because now I don't know if I could have.
It's more tiring.
I was like, wow, when did we take a break? We were just always back and forth.
So how did your husband end up getting involved? So you end up running it just like your father and your mother ran his business years ago.
And my grandparents were in the business.
And your grandparents, yeah.
Yeah, it's in the genes, I think, picking somebody who would.
Does that happen on your husband's side too? Does he have family businesses?
No.
Okay.
His father was, kind of, I guess his father was a physician, but I don't think my grandmother ran the business with him.
Interesting that both of your parents were doctors then, and you both end up running a business in the industry.
My father and his father were physicians. Yeah. There's actually quite a few physicians on my dad's side, some of them still in Ireland. So that's kind of a funny story. So I'm in the home healthcare field, and my husband ended up having a physical therapy staffing business. He provided, he was an independent contractor who provided home healths with physical and occupational therapists, and we would utilize his services. So I was his client, and
That's how you met?
That's how we met.
Okay.
That's how we met. We were friends for years. We were, business partner or business working together, I guess. And we ended up dating. And he ended up selling his interest in that business to his business partner. And we thought, well, let's open up another staffing company in Arizona. Because remember, I had just bought the Arizona license. And so he ended up kind of opening up a staffing company in Arizona. I remember one day he called me up and said, I think your Arizona company needs some help on the sales side. It's not going too well down here. This is what I'm really good at. Oh, and by the way, you didn't sign a prenup, so I think half of this is mine anyway. So I now work for Palmeira Home Health.
That's how it worked.
You think I'm joking, but I should have recorded the call. I was kind of dumbfounded, like, okay.
It's like you took over it from within.
At the time, we weren't even married. We were just dating.
Really?
Kidding. I think we were married because the prenup joke. So that was 10 years ago.
Okay. So you survived 10 years working together. Okay.
Some days are harder than others.
Yeah.
No, for the most part, it doesn't come. I was talking to another person recently who also is in business partnership with their wife, and it's a lot of therapy. I think it's a lot of communication, over communication, and it's really, really difficult to not take things home at night. But you're right, from like generations of people who have done this, and been very successful at it. So I'm hoping we've been okay so far. Decent, successful. Let's keep going.
Yeah. Well, at least it helps with the traveling around, you're doing it together, right? Like, if you are on different schedules, then that can be challenging as well.
Yeah. And I think it's nice to have somebody who just knows what's going on in your life, the stresses that are happening, you can high five, they know exactly all of the bad things in your day. They know the good things in your day. And we're on the same page, and he's got my back. And I think I have his. We're aiming for the same goal. it's really nice. I mean, I
Yeah.
think
So
you know,
you've been running the business now for 16, 17 years or something like that now, and
age me. Did
I'm
I
sure
just age
there's been
myself? Yes. So I think so.
so I'm sure there's been lots of highs and lows, but I have to ask about COVID, given
Yeah,
the
yeah,
work you're in. What was that like when that started to unfold? And take me back to then, March of 2020.
yeah. Well, super interesting. I was in Asia, 'cause my mother and had moved to the Philippines a couple of years after my father passed. So we were visiting her in the Philippines. And I remember this was January of 2020, and we're getting all these news reports that there's this thing that's being carried on planes, and people are like dropping dead in the streets. And she didn't want me to return to the States because she thought something's going to take you out on a plane. And of course, we had been there for a month, and I don't have a visa for much longer. So we went back, and I remember throwing a call together with my entire staff and saying, "This is coming for us. I think it's coming." And we ended up just buying out a ton of PPE, excuse me,
Mm.
masks, and we just
Before even March 13th, before it
yeah,
started to
before
really,
kind of
yeah.
like January, February, kind of prepping for this. And
Mm.
what's funny is I remember we bought 1,000 gowns
Mm.
from a distributor in California when we found them, and we went through all of these supplies within months of
Mm.
buying them. It was just a disaster. But the kind of work that we did it was very necessary. It was really hard. Uh, it was just really scary. Patients were really scared, but I think we did a lot of good things because we could get the patients in their homes, and we had the proper PPE for the most part. Like I said, we went through it really, really quickly, but we were, I think, more prepared than maybe other companies. I remember other companies calling me and saying, "Can you see our patients?" Because
Mm.
we don't have the proper PPE. We don't feel comfortable sending our staff in.
Mm.
Um, but I mean, when we kind of ran out of masks, I remember our patients, I mean, some of our patients and our nurses got together, were making us cloth masks so we could see. It was very sweet, and kind of horrifying all at the same time.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. So we ended up in our business probably having a big boom during COVID from a business perspective, because that's, of course, when healthcare shines. But we did face, I mean, a lot of turnover, a lot of people who were clinicians who were very devastated at what we call caretaker burnout is a big problem. And a lot of people who retired during COVID, some of our old warriors, our nurses and therapists that had just
They're
been
just like, I'm done. I'm out of here.
done, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they were, thinking about retiring, and they
Hmm.
decided a little earlier, or they took, kind of work from home positions, doing quality assurance on charts for a hospital or insurance company, something that just didn't have a lot of patient centric care. Uh, so it's really tough. I think during COVID, I kind of feel like we went through it like zombies. We just did our job. It was really the aftermath of COVID that I think was much harder for us. Was when when things got actually easier, because then you ended up with less clinicians. People really understaffed in our industry. We're all kind of fighting for the same staff, and just a lot of people who were just really scared to, what kind of shots do I need? Where should I be working? Should I be working in a hospital? Should I be working in a facility? Should I be working in home health? I think the aftermath of
So
COVID was
like
actually
2021, 2022, that's when it got harder for you. Yeah.
almost right. Like
Yeah.
during COVID, everybody just kind of, which is, I think, to the clinician's standpoint, I think praise to them, as we hopefully remember, which is these guys just went into auto mode, right? Like,
Hmm.
this is why I do this, right? Is to heal, to be supportive, to hold hands, to make sure somebody gets through these tough times.
Mm.
It's interesting, like nurses, clinicians, physical therapists, all these guys just went into auto mode. Like, I was so, I don't know, I think maybe pride sounds probably too condescending, but just really in awe. How about that?
Mm.
In awe of these guys just really going into, like, this is what we signed up for. Here we go.
Yeah. I've always been so impressed by that when you look at nurses and doctors and stuff like that and how hard they work and they're clearly motivated by that that's why they do it, right? That's what's rewarding to them. That's why they've chosen that profession.
I think it's crazy. Like we had so many patients during COVID, because every time there would be a COVID patient at the hospital, they would need to get them off floor as quickly as possible, get them home. So if somebody was stable enough, then we would take over the minute they got home, so they could free up a bed at the hospital because the
Wow.
hospital was just overloaded. And so these clinicians would, if they're seeing an average of maybe 6 or 7 patients a day, these guys were seeing 8, 9, 10 patients a day sometimes. Just, they're driving around from home to home to home,
Mm.
and 45 minutes to an hour on average with these people. So they're pulling 9, 10-hour days. They're going
And they're
home.
peeling off all the PPE and putting on all new stuff each time. Wow. No wonder you went through it all so fast.
Yeah. And then think about it. They would have to go home to their own children and they'd be worried
Ugh.
about their own family,
Yeah.
their own
Yeah.
parents getting COVID. So
Mm.
um, I think what happened was they went into auto mode during COVID. And then I think a lot of people really questioned, and we ended up as an industry kind of very much suffering from, I think, what we understand now as being caretaker burnout, clinician burnout,
Hmm.
which there's now like TV shows about this, right? Like what
Yeah.
it really means to kind of step back from that and deal with the grief of what happened and the chaos of what happened for so many years. And I think, like I said, I had a lot of kind of, home health warriors that retired. I also just had a lot of people who were just like really phased out by the industry, maybe questioned, "Oh, I don't know if I want to be in healthcare anymore." We saw just a lot of different people taking, uh, like I said, the industry almost became harder in the aftermath of COVID than I
Yeah.
think while we were in it.
So we're almost out of time, but as we catch up to 2025, where do things stand for you now? Like, how do you feel about the industry? Healthcare it's a tough industry to be in.
I don't think there's any secret. We deal with a lot of, if you pick up any newspaper right now in America, there's some story about hospital closing, rural hospitals having a tough time, insurance companies, whatever side we take on that, they're good, they're bad.
Mhm.
Privatized medicine. I think there's a lot of debates raging all over America about what the healthcare industry is going to look like over the next 5 years. And I think our elderly are kind of hitting that. Our baby boomer generation is hitting that age where care and the amount of money they're going to spend on healthcare over the next 10 years, 77 to about 80 years old is when we start to see a really upward trajectory in spending per
Mm.
individual in healthcare. And the baby boomer generation is right there right now,
Mm.
that age. So I think the great part about healthcare is that no matter what AI comes, no matter what, recession, none of that matters. There will always be a job for really, really good caring clinicians and practitioners, and there will always be space for them. And if anything, they're in want. So I think a lot of people are encouraged to get into the healthcare space because it is so, there's a big need. And I would
Yeah.
encourage people to look into, as far as an education for yourself, this is a wonderful place to be, both as opportunities on the back end and the administration side, as well as the clinician side. But I'm interested to see where it will go. So it's recession proof, so it gives me hope. And I think the crazy thing is you get something like home health, which a lot of people don't know about.
Yeah.
We care people in their homes, and it's just wonderful work. So I'm very hopeful as an entrepreneur because it feels good to do this kind of business. We're not
Yeah.
providing anything bad for people. It's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Employ a lot of people. We give people good, solid incomes. It's a wonderful cause. So it's fascinating because I think I go through all of the, like you said, the pitfalls of being an entrepreneur, money issues, financial issues, in healthcare, clinician turnover, HR problems, right? We deal with different states, but at the end of the day, there's a great amount of dignity and
Mm.
you can kind of go through your day going, well, we did some good for some people today. That feels
Yeah.
good. That feels
That's
good.
really nice. That's a great point to end it. Where, Genevieve, can people go to learn more about you and Palmeira Health?
palmhh.com is my website. I sometimes check LinkedIn. So sorry for those of you who are waiting for me to accept your friend request out of social media. I was just telling you before that I just hired a marketing company to help me with all of this.
They're clearing out that backlog.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, like I added you on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh,
Like in 2009. Why haven't you accepted me yet?
get to it. I'll get to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, palmhh.com. Hit us up on our website.
Cool.
We'll be going through a redo soon, I promise.
Great. All right. Genevieve, thanks so much.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for listening to the Rising Entrepreneurs Podcast. This episode is powered by Rise 25. Please subscribe and check out future episodes.